Hey, everybody, before we get started, just a quick reminder that the Otherppl podcast is a listener-supported program. All episodes of this show are free. I make everything available free of charge, nearly 500 episodes and counting, all of it completely free. There's an Otherppl app, that too is free, so everything's free. And what this means is I depend on the support of regular listeners to help keep the show rolling. If you listen regularly, if you get something from this program, if you enjoy it, and you would like to show your support, you can drop a couple of bucks in the hat at patreon.com/otherpplpod. That's patreon.com/otherpplpod. All right? Okay.
You are not alone. You have found other people.
You and I have a friend in common.
Every stupid thing that a writer could do, I've done.
I think it's really beautiful.
Jesus, dude, what a struggle, you know?
It was incredible. You know, it was like your head exploded seeing what was really there.
And now here's your host, Brad Listi.
Just one person.
Hey,
just
everybody, how's
time.
it going? Welcome to the Otherppl podcast. It's good to be with you. I'm Brad Listi. I'm in Los Angeles. My guest today is Chiara Barzini. She has a new novel out from Doubleday. It is called Things That Happened Before the Earthquake. Chiara Barzini and I will be in conversation momentarily. I should say that Chiara and I were supposed to meet in person. We were supposed to do the interview in person earlier this summer, but I had to leave town when my father-in-law fell ill and sadly passed away. So we weren't able to connect when she was here in the States on book tour, but we did have a nice conversation over the transom. Chiara lives in Rome, Italy. So we spoke. She was in Rome. I was in Los Angeles. At one point during the interview, if you listen for it, you can even hear the honking of a scooter in the background, which felt to me at the time very Roman. So Chiara Barzini and I coming up in just a bit. Before we get started, I wanted to offer some congratulations to some of my past guests. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the National Book Foundation released its long list of nominees for this year's National Book Awards. And especially in the fiction department, I had the pleasure of speaking with several of the nominees, and I want to tip my cap to these people. Margaret Wilkerson Sexton, who I had on the program just last week, was nominated for her debut, A Kind of Freedom. Congrats to Margaret. That's wonderful news. Min Jin Lee, with whom I had a delightful conversation earlier this year, was nominated for her novel, Pachinko. Charmaine Craig, not too long ago, had her sitting right here. Her novel, Miss Burma, was nominated. Daniel Alarcón was nominated for his story collection, The King is Always Above the People. He was on the program a couple years ago. And Jesmyn Ward, who has won the National Book Award previously and is a fine writer, just got nominated again for her new novel, Sing, Unburied, Sing. So there are others on the long list, and I haven't gotten a chance to talk to everybody, but I did talk to a good percentage of them, and it's very exciting to see these people getting the recognition that they so richly deserve. So kudos to all, and if you're listening and you haven't heard those conversations, you might want to dip into the archives and check it out. All of those episodes are free of charge. So what else is going on? I'm trying to think. I saw Jean-Claude Van Damme this week. That's about all I've got for you. You know, I had a week of work. I did my busy life. I did my routine. I feel like I'm very regimented, very boring. You know, to fit everything in that I want to fit in. I have this, you know, I talk about this all the time, but I have to ritualize things. I have to schedule things. Sometimes wonder if that's a good idea. Sometimes wonder if that's a brilliant idea, because it's the only way to get everything, you know, to tick every box. But maybe I need to relax more. So anyway, I was riding my bike home from work because I'm a bicycle rider in Los Angeles, one of the rare few who does this. And I was cruising around. I came to a red light, pulled up to a stop at the corner, and I looked to my left, and there is a very familiar, strangely familiar-looking gentleman at the wheel of a Bentley convertible. And he had like a knit cap on, like a winter kind of cap on. So that sort of threw me for a moment, but as I processed his face, as the light turned green, he drove away and I pedaled away. It occurred to me that it was Jean-Claude Van Damme, and we had made eye contact. So that happened. I don't think I've ever seen a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. I've just been like aware of him. Maybe I did as a kid, you know, but it's never something that I was super into. I know there are people out there who really enjoy his work. But that was my celebrity sighting this week. Jean-Claude Van Damme. This stuff happens. You make the weird eye contact with a celebrity. Trying to think of anybody else in recent times. I think the guy that's going to play Han Solo, I saw him not too long ago. Like young Han, I don't even know his name, but I recognized his face. Saw him at a farmer's market, which is very LA. I try to do yoga like once a week, once or twice, twice if I'm lucky. But I try to do it once a week, and I'll usually do it on the weekend. And then I'll go to I'll sometimes go get a juice after yoga, and then go to a farmer's market. It pains me to admit this, but as I'm doing it, I'm like self-aware. Like I call it in my head the douchebag like trifecta. Just yoga, juice, farmer's market. Just hating myself as I go through the motions. But yet I can't resist. And really, inherently, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Like, is there really anything wrong with juice? Is there really anything wrong with stretching out a little bit? Having some quiet time? Buying your produce direct from a farmer? And yet, I understand. I understand why these things are loathsome, particularly when packaged together in one revolting, what do you call it? Packaged together in one revolting package. It's embarrassing. Making eye contact with Han Solo. You like hold a zucchini in your hand. He's sorting through like citrus, like berries. Berries are expensive. Everything's expensive. All this produce. What am I talking about? I say this every monologue. At some point in every monologue, I hit a moment where I'm just like, what am I talking about? Why am I doing this? I feel like the monologues are getting increasingly unwieldy. I recognize it. Jean-Claude Van Damme, not, to the best of my knowledge, cast in the new Star Wars picture, the new Han Solo movie. There's been no Jean-Claude Van Damme renaissance. Remember how they had like the Matthew McConaughey reconnaissance? There has not been a Van Damme ascents. Jean-Claude ascents. Though, he looked like he was in pretty good shape. I think he's ready for it to happen. I think he's prepared for the moment, but it just hasn't happened yet. We haven't had our Jean-Claude Van Damme nostalgia trip yet as a culture. I feel like there was a Sylvester Stallone since a couple of years ago when Creed came out. Like he got nominated for an Oscar. And I don't mean to bag on Sylvester Stallone. There's actually a very compelling argument to be made that Stallone is one of the most talented and productive people working in cinema of modern times. The amount of screenplays he's written. He's actually a very accomplished screenwriter. A lot of his movies he's written a lot of movies that you're not aware of. And I think that Rocky and Rocky II especially are terrific films. I think Creed is a terrific film and a kind of a brilliant resuscitation of that franchise, which I thought had completely burned itself out. And I was wrong. I loved Creed. And I was moved by Stallone's performance. I'm a Stallone fan. I feel like Stallone, people bag on Stallone. He's an easy target just because of the, that slow delivery and the performance of, that he sort of boxed into with Rocky. But, the Stallone essence. I felt bad that he didn't win the Oscar. Yeah, I really thought he was going to. I think he thought he was going to win. Like, he was like, holy shit, I might actually win this. It's got to suck to be on that awards train. I know it's great. You're making tons of money and everyone, you're getting all this attention. But come on. The work that you have to do, the humiliating work that you have to do to go grovel for an Oscar. I don't think people necessarily realize this. All the luncheons, the ass kissing. Like these celebrities and their, the studios, they campaign for this stuff. There's a whole thing. Like, I want to say, like, George Clooney, the year that he won, was, like, out at, like, nursing homes where there's, like, lots of, like, old Academy voters who are, like, in their, you know, their twilight days. He's out there shaking hands, charming them. So I don't think the I guess my point is, I don't think the National Book Award nominees have to do anything like this. It's a much smoother process. It's much less degrading. Chiara Barzini is my guest. Her new novel is called Things That Happened Before the Earthquake. It was great talking with her, and I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chiara Barzini.
There's a kind of self-repression that happens. So anyone who dares to dream in Rome is sort of frowned upon and looked upon as a sort of egomaniacal sort of narcissist. So it's very hard to break from that, I think, to break from the idea that people are going to have a very strong opinion about you if you dare to talk about the fact that you have dreams or have ambition. It's hard to break from that, but I think the new generations are sort of getting over it a little bit. It feels that way, at least, I hope. But that's also why my whole family moved to the United States when we were 15. And it was definitely part of that. It was the beginning of the Berlusconi era. So there was a lot of desire to sort of get out of the country and go have your dreams elsewhere.
Okay. And I want to get to that. I want to get to age 15 and moving to LA. But like, before we do, like, tell me about your family, like where you were raised. Like, I know you were raised in Rome, but like, what did your parents do? Do you have siblings?
Yes, I was raised in Rome. My dad is a filmmaker, and my mom is now a food critic and food writer. I have a younger brother, Matteo, who's a filmmaker as well. And we were sort of raised in a very beautiful sort of farm just outside of the Roman center. And we had a very... I will say maybe something close to a hippie upbringing as kids, in the sense that we had a lot of nature and animals and no rules and a sort of very idealistic idea of what a family should be. And both of my parents are quite sort of political and have their own opinions about how one should raise a family. And they're a bit, they like to break the law a little bit.
This sounds great.
So, yeah, it was very fun.
So what do you mean? Like, do you mean when you talk about breaking the law, do you mean like civil disobedience, like political protest kind of stuff?
Yes, there was a lot of political protest, mostly in the 70s before I was born. So my father was part of the sort of leftist autonomia operaia, the autonomous movement in Rome. There were, he explained to me when I was very young what a Molotov was. And, he was very proud of this. But the funny thing about this autonomous movement, which was sort of like a workers' rights movement that was happening, that had a big moment in the 60s and 70s and then kind of started to decline when the terrorist acts of these leftist groups became more and more intense, and then kind of culminated with the death of a famous politician called Aldo Moro. It was that they were sort of weirdly founded by a kind of group of very bourgeois people. So I've always been kind of cynical about it, because I've been like, you guys are bourgeois. What are you going around talking about, workers' rights and the Communist Manifesto and so much theory, but where's the practice,
Right.
Where's the truth?
Right. Because you're living in a penthouse or whatever, but
exactly.
It gets complicated though, because it's like, I'd rather have people, even if they are bourgeois, be concerned with social justice than not be concerned at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, it sounds like you had a great childhood.
I did have a great childhood. I was very in love with my parents. They were very original, and it wasn't always easy, but it was very fun and very daring. There was also a lot of daring moments that were very fun and adventurous for a kid.
Like what?
Well, my dad was the kind of person who would let you drive a car on an empty road, when you're a kid, or will let you smoke cigarettes if you want to, and jump off of really high rocks when you're very, very young. Go onto ski slopes where you're not supposed to go on, and get lost in the woods. There was a lot of getting lost and almost dying and getting back home after these long adventures, and the first sentence would always be, "You have no idea what happened." And our mom would worry, and we didn't have cell phones back then, so there was always us getting home really late after these sort of like afternoon excursions with our dad.
Well, he sounds like a character.
He does.
And he's a filmmaker, so like, forgive me for not being up to speed on Italian cinema, but like, has he directed a lot of like feature films in Italy?
He has. He had a very important film that came out in the early 90s. That was sort of an Italian big chill film. It was called Italia Germania 4-3, which means Italy Germany 4-3, which is like a sort of historical football, soccer championship match from the World Championship of 1984. No, I'm getting it wrong. Anyway, it's a film about a group of people that gathers after having known each other from their youth, and they all gather to watch this soccer match, and they haven't seen each other in a while, and a lot of stuff comes up when they all see each other again.
Okay, that sounds very Big Chill.
Yeah. It was very Big Chill, and it was very successful, and it was sort of the voice of a generation type of a type film. And then he's done other films since then. Also has worked a lot for television.
And so did you grow up going on set and stuff like that?
Yeah, I did. And I was he would always ask me to act in the things that he did. And I was a very terrible actress, and I always forgot my lines. My brother was very good, though. He was very natural.
Okay, so this is an interest. This brings up an interesting question, though, because I people are good at different things. It seems like sort of an obvious point to make, but like, I think of like really creative people, like bright, intelligent, creative people. You're a gifted writer. You understand how to write characters. You can empathize with them and embody them. I think of, say, like a lot of musicians will sometimes cross over into acting. You see a lot of that. You see a lot of actors try to cross over into music. But I'm always fascinated when somebody who is a very gifted artist tries to work in a medium that's like, outside of their area of expertise or whatever. And some of them can do it, like Tom Waits, for example, the musician, like he can be an effective actor, and like I can believe him in a role, and he sort of blends into the scenery and you don't really notice him. But then like I watch Madonna on screen and it's just like, it doesn't work for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm wondering if you have, I'm always wondering like why, like, like what is it about acting that you have to have, like maybe you have to be able to like completely forget yourself or something, because like I don't think I would be a very good, I'm too neurotic or something to be an actor. Like I feel like I would be thinking about it too much.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think with acting, there's a certain magic is involved, and I do think it has to do with the ability of losing yourself a little bit, and being having that sort of natural ability to improvise and to not think of the camera as an intruder, not to be self-conscious in front of a camera. I think takes a lot of character and a lot of instinct. So I think you either have it or you don't with the acting. And I think it's one of those things where you can never really tell, you know. You always think, oh, she's so beautiful, she'd be such a great actress, and then you get a model in front of a screen and it's a disaster, or you know, someone completely unexpected. I have a friend who stutters very badly, and he's actually a photographer and a director. But we ended up asking him to play a role in a film that we wrote. And not only did he nail the role, he's sort of the most touching and heartbreaking character in the film. And when Variety wrote a review about the film, the main thing that they mentioned was this guy Corrado, and they said, "Oh, what a great discovery he was." So I think you never know until you actually put him in front of a camera, you know, who has it, whatever it is, and who doesn't.
Well, you know what? Now you're making me rethink this, because I've never tried acting. I could be the next Laurence. I could be the next Laurence Olivier. I have no idea.
That'd be great to find out.
Yeah, I guess like if I'm trying to imagine myself in front of a camera, like I'm not even comfortable like when somebody takes a picture of me with their iPhone, you know. So I can't imagine like standing in front of a camera. And the thing too is that like when it comes to film acting, it's not just like one guy with a camera. There's like a whole crew standing there. You're lit. Like it's a big, you know, there's a big group of people sort of encircling you while you do this stuff.
Yeah, it's very intimidating.
So growing up, did you have like cinematic ambitions like from the get-go? Like were you thinking I'm going to be a director too, or I'm going to be a movie star? Like I can imagine like that would be a natural thing to think if your dad is working in the movies and you're sort of growing up around this stuff. Right.
Well, it was definitely just daily bread in a sense. So I never consciously thought I'm going to be an actress, or I'm going to be in movies, or I'm going to be around the world of movies. But when the world of movies was around, it just felt like, oh, I can try that, or I can try this, or I can see how this works. And I actually did do a little bit of acting when I was about 18. I was in a kind of cult indie movie called SLC Punk, about the punk scene in Salt Lake City in the 80s, and that was very fun. And felt also very natural, and the director was a family friend who would hang out at the house all the time, and he said, you know what, I'm making a film about punks and you should be in it. But you know, I think that with time, you know, as always, you sort of start to understand that even though something is familiar, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you should be doing. So I was attracted by that world, but I knew that I didn't want to be in it in a way, you know, I didn't want to act. And I've always loved writing, so I quickly steered in that direction.
Well, and okay, so I can see it being of like sort of two ways, where you have parents who are artistic, and so you might feel on the one hand like a certain pressure, like how could I, like, do I want to do this? Do I want to do what my parents do, or at least be in the same ballpark? And feeling like I don't know, a sense of internal pressure or a measuring up, you know. But then on the other hand, I feel like if you are in a family where your parents are creative, it creates a kind of permission structure and a sense of possibility. Like, oh yeah, like this is something one can do. You can make your life in the arts. You can be a creative person past the age of, 18 or whatever. And I think that, I often talk to writers on this program who did not grow up in creative households and were sort of the outlier in their family. And they had to kind of learn that permission structure or create it for themselves. So, like, what was it for you? Like, it sounds like your parents were pretty nurturing and probably encouraged your creative pursuits. But did you ever also feel like a sense of, oh boy, like my dad's good at this, and like, do I even want to go there, or do I want to try to like, kind of like chart my own course and do something different?
You're right about the giving myself permission part. That it's been with my brother and I since day one, and I think we've both tried very different times to go on very different paths that always had that sort of creative attitude, whether it was writing, whether it was directing, whether it was writing for the stage, or just writing weird sitcoms with our friends when we were kids. But for me, it was really, it's not that I decided I wanted to be a screenwriter. I think at some point I actually decided I wanted to be a writer. And then when I decided that, the screenwriting thing kind of happened through another channel. So at that point, I was very happy and willing to give myself permission to sort of go down both routes in a parallel way. So I never had that moment of like, oh boy, I'm 18 or I'm 20 and I can see clearly that what I really want to do is be a director just like my dad, and I thankfully didn't have to go through that, which I think actually would have been tougher. It's very weird what happens in these creative families. There is definitely a permission and there's an atmosphere of, yay, tell your own story and everyone has their own and we all have to express ourselves. But then when you actually do it, it's a whole different ball game. And I think it's much easier to be critical of the work of your relatives and to, sort of have to say your opinion about it and have you put your distance between your own work and your relatives' work. So it's a delicate space, I think, the creative family in the same sort of creative realm business. But it can be done. And I think I was cautious in trying to sort of arrive to it, taking side streets rather than the main road.
So is there a sense of competition? Do you feel anything like that where it's like I'm, trying to outdo my dad, or would he feel threatened if like you won an Oscar? You know what I'm saying? Or does that come, like, are you and your brother like secretly competing with each other? Like, or is it more of a supportive thing?
My brother and I are not competing at all. In fact, we really love collaborating, and we have a very similar. We're very compatible, and we're sort of complementary in a sense. My mother is she's a food writer, so she's sort of writing, and she writes more nonfiction. So, saved myself there. With my dad, it's a little bit more complicated. I don't think that there is competition, but I do recognize that sometimes we haven't sort of seen eye to eye on work-related things. We also tried to work together a couple of times. Like, oh, wouldn't it be great, if, I directed this and you wrote it, and I think we've tried a few times. A few times it's worked, but the final time I think we're both sort of like, all right, I think we need to take a break from thinking that this is actually a good idea.
Yeah, that's a intimate making art with somebody is just an intimate period, but then like filmmaking, that's a whole process. I was a film student in undergrad and sort of have a sense of what goes into making a movie, like broadly. And, as a person who gravitated more towards writing, that the collaborative nature of it and the amount of cooks in the kitchen and all the moving parts, like I found that kind of overwhelming. And I can only imagine like that doubles when you're doing it with your parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think with a parent, there's also that weird in the back of your head, there's always, and I think especially father-daughter, the idea that you want to be congratulated for your work, and you want to be seen, and you want to be admired, and you want to make sure that you're making your dad happy, which is a huge component. And, that's not necessarily what works in a creative team. It's not that you're trying to make the director happy, is that you need to try and make the best film possible. So I think it gets too psychological, the kind of reasoning that starts to go behind what you're working on, and soon enough it's about something completely different than the actual film.
Yeah. So and I don't know. I guess like I'm trying to imagine, like this is so far removed from my own family experience. So I'm trying to imagine as you're talking, like making a movie with my parents, neither of whom are involved in the arts, and like I don't know. I applaud anyone who could get through that process. It just seems like inherently full of like tripwires, and like pitfalls. But I guess people do it.
Absolutely.
So at what age, you talked about like making a conscious decision to pursue writing. What age was that? Like, were you an adult when that happened, or was this during your childhood?
I was about 15 when I had moved to the United States, and I was 16 when I wrote my first short story, and I decided to try to take a sort of creative writing class they were offering in school, and I really loved I got a very big rush from it, and I was very excited about it, and I was very excited about reading. And I'd grown up with books. My grandfather actually was a very big writer in Italy, and he was writing in the English language, and he wrote a big bestseller called The Italians, which is sort of it's a go-to book for anyone who wants to understand Italian character and Italian flaws and Italian shortcomings. It's a sort of cultural Bible of Italy. So I was always very drawn to his world and to his having his foot in two worlds, the Italian world and the American world, and being able to explain America to Italy and vice versa. So it was, that was always there sort of in the back of my head. And then I think when I wrote my first short story, I just felt very excited about it. And then, then school took over and other things took over. And then, there was college, and there was a lot of overlap with theater and maybe acting or maybe directing, maybe, wanting to do something in that realm, but not being sure. But that initial first story had really stayed with me, and I just kept kind of doing that on the side and writing short stories and starting 100 books that I never finished. The classic thing that you do as a teenager. I'm going to start a book, and it's like 2 days later. Oh, never mind. But then, when I was in college, I think that's when it really shifted. My family at that point had moved back to Italy, and I was really alone in the United States and had been for quite some time. And I started writing stories again, and I submitted them to, the creative writing program at the school I was going to at UC Santa Cruz. And then I got in, that feeling of like, oh, you run and see what names made it on the list, and mine was there, and it was so exciting. It was like the first time that I had gotten into something because of my writing. I'd gotten into the creative writing class. So I think that's when I started to take it very seriously, when someone kind of allowed me to do it formally.
And gave you that like affirmation.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's go back to age 15, because this interests me on a lot of levels. Like this decision to pack up the family and move abroad, like right in the middle of your like high school years, go to an entirely different country. Your father, I imagine, was going to try to do some film work in LA. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
And then also, and this speaks, I think, to the political moment that we're in the United States, because I see a lot of parallels between Trump and Berlusconi. I hope that
oh, absolutely.
They seem to me to be kind of a piece. They even have like the same skin tone somehow or something. Like there's something going on with like the aesthetic, but just like, as somebody who kind of lived through that as an Italian, like is there any wisdom you can offer Americans who are distressed by the man in the Oval Office right now?
Absolutely. Well, a very funny thing exactly on this subject matter is that when I was just in LA, and Jonathan Ames, who's a friend and great writer who presented my book in LA at Book Soup, we're just sort of going over it and having a little chat about it. And he was like, do you realize that there's a part in the book where you talk about Berlusconi and it actually really sounds like you're talking exactly about Trump? And then he had me read it out loud, and it was so funny because it was just even a physical description,
right,
of the tan and the white. and the white teeth and this hair that kind of looks like a fluorescent wig, and coming from basically being a business person and asking, Berlusconi, his political party was called Forza Italia, and it was sort of, the premise was sort of make Italy great again,
So it's the same play. It's the same playbook.
Oh, it's exactly the same playbook, And I think actually that's why Italians are so cynical about Americans being distressed by Trump, is just we feel like, oh my God, you guys, okay, at worst you're going to have this guy for 8 years. We had him for over 20 years, So we couldn't get rid of him. He'd come out from one side and come back at it from another. We couldn't even get him to go to jail when we found out that he was basically, holding a prostitution ring with underage girls. So obviously Italy is in no way as powerful a country as the United States are. And what is at risk with Trump being, and even, 8 years of Trump could basically end the world. Yeah. Which seems like we're on a very good track so far, and it hasn't even been a year yet.
Yeah, it's terrible. And by the way, I would say too, we say that 8 years is the maximum, but who knows? Because I feel like people with his particular diagnosis, like whatever you want to call it, whatever it is that ails Donald Trump, people like him don't usually give up power very easily, or if they do, they want to pass it to their offspring. So it's like, I'm not entirely sure he's not going to try to extend this thing. Like, I wouldn't put anything past him is basically my point,
Yeah. You're right. Who knows? Maybe he'll change the law in that regard too,
Yeah. I mean, he's completely off.
No more 8 year, no more 8. Yeah.
Or he'll just be like, Ivanka's going to run, and he's a special kind of crazy. And I think that it'd be interesting to kind of talk about, like, what is it? I mean, aside from like the pure aesthetics of the two men, but like, what is the common thread between Berlusconi and Trump? Like, what I say diagnosis. Like, what is it that is ailing both men? It seems like they kind of suffer from the same thing. Is it like, I guess it's narcissism. It's, do you know?
It's narcissism.
That's what it is. It's like pathological narcissism or sociopath, sociopathic behavior.
Yeah. There's definitely sociopathic behavior. I think it's people who have had the rush very early on in life, or at some point in their life, they had the rush of taking a very big risk, and seeing themselves succeed at something, and kind of having that thrill of obtaining that kind of power. And I think that they basically get addicted to that form of power and that form of having that much influence on other people can sort of be a huge turn on, and then I think that they sort of went ahead and really refined that, how do I get more powerful? How do I make that thing happen again? How can I dream even bigger and try to make it happen? And in that sense, they've been very powerful people because they've really managed to achieve what no one could have ever thought they could achieve, So I think it's just a matter of, not just a matter, but I think I think ego and being hungry for power and taking risks and kind of gambling and seeing how far they can get away with things. I don't think Trump really thought that he could become president. I think he was just as excited and surprised and power tripping on that than the rest of us were sort of horrified by. And so I think it is a character flaw. I think it's the character. Probably it's the character trait of dictators. I think Mussolini was the same way. I think Hitler is the same way. And you don't question yourself. You just keep going. You don't apologize. You don't ever admit to having lied or anything like that. You just have to sort of keep going and hold your chin up and keep your shoulders wide and smile to whatever life brings to you, and decide very early on that you're going to be a winner no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm always like, I'm always wondering like what actually happened to Donald Trump as a boy. Like, did he come out of the box like this? Is it just his wiring, or was he abused as a kid? Like, how do you become so utterly insensitive to the emotions and feelings of other people? And like, I guess like I've had people say like, I don't care. I don't care what happened to him as a kid. Like, fuck him.
Yeah.
But like as a writer and as a person who's interested in people, like I genuinely want to know, like, what the fuck created this? Like, why is he like this? Like, how can anybody be like this? And I always want to believe that there was some sort of damage done to him early on that sort of imprinted itself upon him and led to, a series of behaviors over his lifetime. But maybe I'm giving him too much credit or something, or I don't know.
I'd love to see Donald Trump in kindergarten and see where it all started. As a crying baby.
Maybe you can write that screenplay.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I'm going to go with the whole I don't care movement in that regard, meaning no matter what happens to you as a child, I don't know if anything justifies behaving like this.
So how much because this is another thing, like America has a tendency to look inward, like we don't tend to look outward at the world as much as we should. And I guess like a question that I would have is, like, how much, like in your day-to-day life in Italy, like how much are Italians thinking about him and talking about American politics? Like, is this something that you hear about pretty regularly? Because, like you said earlier, like, the consequences of Trump's actions have impact on the whole entire world in, potentially a very grave way. But I guess I'm curious to know, like, how much resonance does this have on a day-to-day basis with people in, say, Italy?
I think it has resonance. I think we're more detached and we're not as emotionally involved, and we roll our eyes and we get scared. And I think a lot of us think he's not really going to do that, right? And try to stay on I think we allow ourselves to be, since we have some distance from it, we kind of keep hoping that maybe it isn't true, or maybe it's not affecting us, or maybe, it's sort of one of those like horrible things that's happening, and we try to tell ourselves it's happening very far away, so we don't have to worry about it. It's kind of like, the horrors you see from the war, where you just sort of try to be like, oh my God, I'm going to try to not think about this. So on the one hand, there's a sort of like trying to close an eye on things. And, on the other hand, we are sort of terrified, and it is in the news every day. But I think what is happening in America is that Trump has really gotten into people's subconscious. He's gotten under people's skin. He's really getting in there. And that whole feeling of ickiness, of something's wrong, or, someone was telling me, my sex life has changed since Trump has been elected. The whole sort of like the way that he's affected your life in every single corner of your life, that hasn't happened yet. And
we'll just give it time.
And I think we'll give it time. Yeah. And, it was very funny because when I was in the last night I was in the United States before coming back to Rome, I actually finally had a Trump dream. And that's when I knew, okay, I've been here too long. Now I'm finally having dreams about Trump.
That's how it starts. That's how it starts. Just so you know, that's the beginning.
That's how it starts. Exactly. That's how I knew it was a sign of alarm.
So let's get back to, because we were at age 15 and coming to the States, and then we got into like the Berlusconi Trump rabbit hole. But I am curious to go back to that time in your life and to hear about like what it was like to be, an adolescent, and to suddenly go from living in Rome on this like idyllic farm outside of town to being in Los Angeles. And what part of town were you in Los Angeles?
So not far from, the novel that I wrote. We actually did move, except not in 1992, which is when the novel takes place, but in 1994 after the earthquake. So our real family story is actually things that happened after the earthquake. We moved to Van Nuys, which was actually, though, just as horrifying in 1994 as it was in 1992. And so we did have an idea of what living in LA would be like, and our expectations about what our life would be like were very much disappointed. I did think there would be a center in LA for some reason. I thought it was a normal city with a center where people walked, and suddenly I was in Van Nuys and it was in the middle of nowhere, and it was the most dreary, depressing place I had ever seen, and I was very upset. And I remember waking up one morning and leaving the house and deciding I was going to walk downtown to see what was happening downtown. And I walked up to Sepulveda and asked someone, "Excuse me, how do I get downtown?" And she looked at me, she's like, "You're walking? Go back home." Forget it.
You mean like downtown LA or downtown Van Nuys?
Downtown LA, because I thought, actually LA would have an actual downtown. I thought that it was like a normal city where you have, I guess I realized, okay, we're obviously living in the outskirts of the center of the city, but there must be a center, Yeah. European cities are very much built around that idea. So I was like, well, okay, fine. There's no squares. There's no, scooters. People aren't walking, but there must be a center at least. So there was no center. That's what I quickly found out.
That's an adjustment. I feel like this is one of the, this is such a common thing to talk about when you talk about Los Angeles, but it does bear repeating, because it's it's a beautiful piece of real estate, like the weather and the mountains and the ocean. It's a great place to build a city as long as you can get some water, there are some certain, there are certain challenges infrastructurally, but we've overcome those. But it could be designed so much better. You know what I'm saying? If we could just have a do-over and really put some thought into planning this thing, it could be so much better.
I agree, but I do see a lot of improvements since the 90s, actually. Their public transportation is not just for homeless people. It's now actually, functioning a little bit more, and neighborhoods are connected amongst each other. And I see a bit of an improvement.
I hope so. It's got to. There's only so many cars. There's only so many cars you can have on the road. And I say that as somebody who's lived here for almost 20 years, and I do have a lot of love for my hometown. This is the place I've lived longest of anywhere that I've ever lived. And so, for all of I criticize it from a place of love, and I'm wondering, did you come around? Did you adjust and wind up finding the place charming, or was it just kind of this dispiriting, disillusioning situation where the place was kind of demystified? Because I think that happens too. You grow up with Hollywood movies, and Los Angeles sort of presents itself outwardly in the culture as a sort of Shangri-La, but of course, when you're on the ground here, that goes away pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. No, I hated it all the way through when I was living there. With a passion. But there was no way around it. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I was ready to go anywhere. I applied to every single college I could think of, anywhere but LA. But the very strange thing that happened was that just a few years after moving out of LA, this thing started to happen where I started to miss it. And I was missing things like strip malls and parking lots and intersections and smells, certain kind of smells, eucalyptus smell. And all of a sudden, all of those things would rush back to me, and I realized that they meant home to me. So I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I had actually grown attached to the city, and that attachment turned into affection, and then that turned into maybe even obsession. And I sort of, then I moved to New York after that, and I had this thing of does California really exist? Did those years in California really exist? And I became sort of obsessed with revisiting places and reading about these places, and started sort of obsessively reading, California literature, and kind of really finally immersing myself in what I couldn't see while when I was living there. I couldn't see it. I definitely needed some distance, but the distance was very helpful, and it kind of it helped me create a character out of the city, and I finally was able to meet the city in a place that felt like a peaceful place and not like a war zone. And then now I still have a very love-hate relationship, but I really do love it in some way, and I wanted the book to sort of be an ode to the city and not just a sort of dirty memory of it.
Well, it's also, like, to go back to something I said earlier, to move country, like moving alone, like even if you were to have moved within Italy or even within Rome, like that alone can be traumatic for a teenager. But those years are so emotionally charged anyway. To move halfway around the world to a city as difficult as Los Angeles, and I say difficult, like difficult to kind of comprehend, difficult to sort of integrate into. Like, it's not an easy place to come to as a visitor or to come to as a new person. Like, it's, I don't know. Like you said, there's no center. It's easy to get lost in it. It's easy to feel adrift. That's just it just strikes me as such a powerful combination of experiences. It makes sense to me that you would be writing about it all these years later, and that you would have this kind of sense of dislocation and this sense of, like, did it really happen? Like, I don't know, all there's a very strong logic to all of that to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also the reason why, those are very easy years to sort of have a hazy memory of is because it was really the most sort of eruptive time that I think the city ever went through. I always think of those years as the sort of teenage years of the city, because it was like, it was earthquakes, it was riots, it was fires, wildfires. It was, the O.J. Simpson trial, that's sort of like the most formative time, I think, for the city. Sort of a rite of passage, or, the city's own kind of coming of age years. So they were very chaotic, and there was a lot of sort of smoggy, nebulous, you couldn't really grasp what was actually happening. It just felt like everyone was scared, like everyone was violent, and that the earth was shaking, basically. So it's easy to sort of.
I was going to say, you're making me feel glad to live here. It's like, as Burbank has been on fire, like, over the past couple of weeks, and like, with these hurricanes that have been hitting the United States, like, I freaked out last week and bought a earthquake kit. Like, I just went online and I was like, I got to get prepared. Like, I got to get some water and some knives and be ready to go.
Flashlights.
Yeah,
for sure. There's a weird circularity between the early 90s and today. It's very strange, kind of freaky.
Oh man. Well, and so you leave. You want to get out. You're an adolescent. You're in Van Nuys, and you're just like, take me anywhere. And you wind up going to UC Santa Cruz, which is a lovely part of the country. Like, Santa Cruz. Was that better? You had a good. It sounds like you enjoyed that more.
I did. I think originally I wanted to go to New York at all costs, because it was like, I want to go back to somewhere that feels like Europe. And then when I got into the schools in New York, my dad was like, great, who's going to pay for them? And of course, I think, we're Italian, so it's not easy to get any kind of loan situation. So, decided on compromising and staying in California. But it was actually the wisest choice, I think. I loved living in Santa Cruz. I loved having these 4 years of living in the woods in this very strange town, with deer coming up to your bedroom window and knocking on your window, and kind of people running naked on mushrooms in the middle of the campus at night, and these big moons and the ocean. It just felt like here we are. You have 4 years to really experiment and figure out what you love, and here you go. I was handed this experience, which for an Italian person is a real miracle, because university here is nothing like that. The whole idea of campus barely exists. You rarely move away from your parents' house when you're going to college. In fact, you're usually basically squatting their house and trying to have your own sort of grown-up experiences on the side while your mom is in the other room cooking spaghetti. So it felt like, such a gift to be able to have that much freedom in such a wonderful and sort of place that was where you'd kind of break all the rules, and where they had classes like history of the Grateful Dead, and where you had teachers like Angela Davis talking about the prison industrial complex. It was very, it was kind of surreal, to have all of that in one campus.
Did you
so it was very exciting for me, and I had some great.
Did you take the history of the Grateful Dead class?
I didn't, but I went to check it out one day because I didn't think it actually existed, and it did exist.
I'm a huge Deadhead. I love that. I love that band.
I love the Grateful Dead too.
Oh, you do? Okay, good. So
I do.
So Santa Cruz then leads you to New York City? Is that you finally got to New York after you got out of there?
Yeah, I had 1 year back in Rome, very much the famous graduate year. I think if there were to be a Italian version of the Graduate movie, it might be my 1 year back in Rome. But it was a good year because I kind of got some writing done, and it was supposed to be I was supposed to move to New York right after, but then I think it was just then that 9/11 happened, and I thought to myself, all right, maybe I don't want to move to New York right away. I think I'm going to give it some time. I was actually really supposed to go in September, and then I was so completely shocked and horrified by everything that I gave myself a few more months. So it wasn't a whole year; it was maybe like a school year. And then I moved to New York.
So you get to New York in 2002, and what was your?
No, it's 2001. It's still 2001. It's like the summer of 2001, I think, right? Or no, 2002, I guess. Oh, yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah, it would mean if it was a school year, then because it was 9/11, 2001, and then over the fall, winter, and then 2002. Right. So you get there in the aftermath, but you've given it a little bit of time. What was your impression of New York? Was that more of a fit?
Yeah, I loved New York from the very beginning. I loved it from when I was a kid, and I always thought I'm going to come back. And then I did, and I loved it so much. I was ready to do anything there. I worked as a waitress. I was a terrible waitress. The people at the restaurant said, Chiara puts the weight in waitress, or she couldn't care less about waitressing. There were all these sort of inside jokes at the restaurant. But it was very much a learning experience, and I think, that kind of lifestyle where you're eating canned beans and, trying to sort of survive and, wear the same outfit every single day and try to make rent at the end of the month. That sort of falling in love with the city thing is something you can handle when you're in your early 20s, probably not when you're a little bit older.
So how long were you there for?
I was there until 2007.
Okay, so a good amount of time. You did your time. You had your 20s in New York.
I did.
And why did you leave? Why did you leave?
Well, I wasn't planning on leaving, but when I arrived in Rome, I was waiting for my visa to renew or something like that. And while I was waiting for that, the person that I'm now, that is now the father of my children, offered me to write a film with him. He'd been offered to write a movie, and it was a very cheesy romantic comedy called Sorry But I Love You. That was taken from the sort of big bestseller book out here. And when he asked me to write the film, I said, well, sure, okay. And I procrastinated going back to New York. And then when we actually started writing the film, and the film was done very quickly, and it was a very big box office hit, And immediately that spiraled into, well, you guys are a great romantic comedy couple. Why don't you write some more? And, I had this whole sort of, well, I need to go back to my life of poverty and teaching, literature in Harlem at the City College. I can't stay here and be a screenwriter. But then after a couple of months, I realized, you know what, this is actually not a bad idea to be starting to actually write films. And then Luca and I fell in love writing that cheesy romantic comedy. So it's even cheesier in the end of the day.
I mean, yeah, I was like, I feel like that could lead to some sort of meta screenplay about two screenwriters who write a romantic comedy and fall in love while writing a romantic comedy.
I know it's very perfect for a romantic comedy. And that's sort of what happened. We started writing together. We became a writing duo, and we became a couple. And Luca is very Roman, very Italian, and there was no way that I could drag him to move back to the United States with me. I've tried in very many different times, but I have not succeeded. So we'll see. So since then, it's always been about having like a foot in two places and trying to get my whole family to accept the cause.
Well, and just, wait till your kids are like 15, and then you can, move to Sherman Oaks or, someplace out there in the valley, and they can
exactly.
They can have their powerful experience of dislocation in the in like either the waning days of the Trump administration or in its messy aftermath.
That's the plan.
Yeah,
that's absolutely the plan.
So,
it was very funny because when we were there this summer, there was a lot of, talk, I spent a lot of time in LA, and so I could hear myself asking my kids very similar questions to the ones that my parents had asked me when they were trying to get me to move to LA. It was like, isn't it great here? It's always sunny. Isn't it just amazing here? Wouldn't you like to live here? And I could hear myself really getting close to that pattern of just trying to get them on board on something. And thank God I left just in time.
Yeah, I mean, and I find myself, my wife and I will do that no matter where we travel, where I feel like the first 24 to 48 hours on the ground, we're spent, we always spend them thinking we could live here. We could do this. This place is great, I remember doing that in Amsterdam. For the first 2 days, I was convinced we're going to live here. This is it. This is our future.
I know. I love that. I love when you go to a city and you feel that the city is calling you in. It's very romantic.
Yeah. And do you find yourself as a parent, having been raised, especially by a father who encouraged exploration and didn't, wasn't overprotective, let's put it that way, and was risk taking and getting lost and sort of giving you that freedom. Are you that way with your kids? Are you come on kids, hop on the scooter, let's go, or let's walk into the woods? And
yeah, with a little more caution, I think. I will have them use helmets. I will, I think I'm the sort of, there's a little more wisdom to my approach, but people often tell me oh, I really love how free you are with your kids. And I think when they say free, they mean something else, but we'll see. But I think I'm a little bit less adventurous than my dad was.
They have to
probably as a reaction.
They can't smoke Marlboro Reds. They have to smoke Marlboro Lights. I mean, we have to moderate this stuff. And not until they're 12.
Yes, Marlboro Lights, and not until they're 12, and preferably with those smoking machines, whatever they're called, the ones that everyone is using for smoking pot now.
Oh, the vaporizers.
Yes.
Yeah. That seems like a lot of work. And now they have actual vaping stations or vape bars where you can vape with other vapors. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting old or something. Is this really a thing? I drive by these places sometimes, and I just I feel like I just have absolutely no frame of reference.
I know. I feel you on that.
So you've published this book. You're writing screenplays. You're living in Rome. I think a lot of people listening are going to say that you've got it figured out. That sounds very good right about now to me.
It's false. It's all fake. I haven't figured out anything. I'm constantly in a state of crisis.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah. No, don't worry. No, there's a lot of great things about it, but you're always doubting your choices as a parent, as a partner, as a creative person. But it's definitely, if I were to look at it objectively, it should be a very happy time. So I am very thankful for it. And it's a very exciting and full time of my life. But, that doesn't mean that there isn't a whole mountain of neuroses waiting right around the corner.
That mountain of neuroses. It plagues us all.
It sure does.
So let me ask you this. Like, you're raised in Rome. Were you raised with any kind of religion? Like, there's obviously a lot of Catholicism in Italy, but I'm curious to know, like, it sounds like you were probably raised outside of that tradition because your parents were sort of unconventional, or am I wrong?
I was raised outside of that tradition. There's a very funny story about how I got baptized, which is that when I was 7, my dad asked me, do you want to get baptized? We didn't do it when you were born, but do you want to do it now? And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, basically it means that if you don't get baptized, you go to hell, no matter what. And if you do get baptized, you'll probably end up in like purgatory for like a whole bunch of years. And that's really what he said, because he had a sort of religious upbringing and his mom had sort of given him the whole hell or paradise sort of dogmas. And so I said, of course I'm going to get baptized. Where do I sign? And so I got baptized when I was 7, and the nun that was giving me, because when you don't do it right, when you're born, the priests or whatever, you're the parochial people ask you to sort of do some studying, Bible study stuff. And so I remember the first day of Bible study, the nun asks me, so what is your first memory? What's the first thing you can remember? And I said, the first thing I can remember is my parents' wedding and me standing right in the middle of them, not wanting them to get married and being very jealous and playing around and not wanting them to get married. And she gave me this horrified look, and I got back in the car when my mom picked me up, and she said, what did you do today in Bible studies? And I was like, I told them about how my first memory was of you guys getting married, and she seemed very upset about that. And she said, yeah, I can't believe you told the nun that you came to our wedding. Are you crazy? I don't know why. What's wrong with that? So yes, so that's very much my parents. They get me baptized. They do bring me to their wedding. They don't tell me that having a child out of wedlock is supposed to be some crazy sin. So there's a lot of confusion. Let's just put it that way.
And so, but where are you today? Like, do you have any kind of like spiritual thing going on?
I do have a spiritual thing. Obviously, having lived many years in California, I have developed a great love for meditation, and I practice Transcendental Meditation. And I also have a very strong connection to the Madonna, whom I love very much. But I don't have a good relationship with priests or, people who work around the church. Yeah. I to think of, I like the sort of direct line to the Holy Mary.
Okay, so, and you say Transcendental Meditation, so did you do you paid the money and did the class and got the mantra?
I paid the money. I did. I paid the money.
Was it worth it?
What can I say? I think it was worth it. I don't agree with the fact that, one should pay money to learn a technique that is so easy. But I think the fact that you pay money for it and that you get such a sense of what it means to do it in a disciplined way is actually what instills the idea in you that you need to take it very seriously. So, this was 10 years ago that I started, and I still practice almost every day.
You do,
except for when my kids go crazy.
Yeah, like 2 20-minute sessions?
No. The 2 20-minute sessions is pre-babies. I'll do 1 20-minute session.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. The afternoon or the evening session's hard.
Yeah. It's very hard.
That one gets away from me. But I mean, I feel like if you can start in the morning somehow doing it, then
yeah. Do the first thing in the morning before everyone assaults you.
Yeah. And do you feel like the mantra, like you just repeat like a 2-syllable mantra kind of over and over again, like, or whatever this technique is. I've tried endlessly to get people who have done the TM class to like explain it to me. And there's always like a reticence. It's like people don't want to, you're not supposed to tell anybody what your mantra is. And then a friend of mine just did it, and she's like, it's actually like, it's simple, but it's actually like complex. And I'm like, well, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah. I think the mantra, I don't know. I might be, saying terrible things here, but I just think the mantra is a reminder. It's just a sound. It's just something to go back to when you're going off track. So I'm not sure about the sort of superpowers of the mantra. As much as I am sure that it is a good thing to come back to when you feel yourself starting to have thoughts.
Yeah. Right? That makes sense to me. So I'm like, maybe I should just make up my own and just go back to that. I've done some of that, I guess, where you have just like a nonsense word, 2 syllables, and you just kind of repeat that. And then as soon as you catch yourself like planning your day or like litigating an old argument or something like that everybody sort of does in their head without, realizing it a lot of the time, then you just go back to the mantra. Yeah. That's it, right? I figured it out. There we go.
I think you figured it out. I think you're a little guru.
Yeah, that's cool. And then like the Madonna, like that's something that I'm curious about because, and I remember like my wife and I actually got married in Italy. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just the two of us, and we just wanted to do something travel oriented. And, I don't know, that was what we decided to do. And logistically and like legally, it was easier to get married in Italy than it was in a lot of countries. Like there wasn't like a huge amount of, legal stuff to do. Like some of these countries you had to like live there for 6 months and stuff like that we, obviously couldn't do. So, but I remember like seeing the Madonna all over the place, and like, what's the direct line? Do you know what I'm saying? I understand finding meaning in the symbolism of Mary and all that kind of stuff, but is there more to it? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just curious to know like how you comprehend it.
I'm not sure how I comprehend it, except for the fact that I'm so in love with this idea of this big mama who's like a mother to everyone, and just feels like such a nurturing and all forgiving, beautiful woman who kind of feel taken care of when you're in her presence. So I think, it's probably the sort of suffering child in me that's like, oh, take care of me, Mom.
Yeah.
Appeal. She's a strong woman. She gave birth to the Son of God. That's a really big deal.
Okay, so
I love her for that.
Yeah, no, and it's weird because I say this and I express like some degree of like not understanding, but yet we came back from our wedding trip to Italy and we had bought like one of the pieces of art that we brought back. Like we brought back a couple of like just little paintings, like memento kind of things, and one of them is of the Madonna, and she still hangs in our bathroom to this day. Yeah. Like I feel like it's a good luck charm. Like I feel like she's she's sort of like there. I'm like, I like having her in the house. It just feels like a good thing to have around. And it obviously reminds us of a good time. But the other thing, like there's another part of me that might be more cynical and skeptical, and I've thought this because I was raised Catholic, where you talk about the virgin birth, and I'm just like, it seems to me like she was a woman who got pregnant out of wedlock, right?
Probably.
Right?
That's exactly what happened.
And like back then, maybe it was like, who knows what that, I don't even know the history well enough to know what the politics around that would have been back then, but I can't imagine that it was like,
the Spirit of God.
Yeah. Encouraged, but,
oh, yeah.
I don't know. Like, I guess that's the way I've sort of like conceptualized her, and not in a negative light either. Like that's part of my admiration, is that she strikes me as a woman who in her time was doing things and behaving in ways that sort of cut against the grain. And, and yet I feel like a lot of times she's sort of held up as this sort of embodiment of all that is with the grain, if that makes sense. You know? So I guess there's a misconception. I sometimes feel like there's a misconception, but I guess we all have our own little conceptions of her.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, I really have enjoyed talking with you. It's fun. It's always fun to talk to somebody like halfway around the world. Like, it's sort of magical that this is possible, and that.
I know. Thanks to Skype.
Yeah, it sounds like you're right next door. And I'm sorry that I missed you when you were in Los Angeles, but things came up and we weren't here. So it would have been fun to meet in person. I hope that we get a chance another time when you move your family out here in a few years.
Exactly.
You can look me up, and hopefully, hopefully the city and the country and the world will still be intact.
I hope so too. And I always come to LA because I now love it, and the kids will be moving into the war zone, and we'll all be happy there.
Well, look me up when you get here.
I will, for sure. Thank you so much, Brad.
All right, there you go, folks. That's Chiara Barzini. Her novel is called Things That Happened Before the Earthquake. It is available now from Doubleday. Go get your copy. Chiara Barzini, Things That Happened Before the Earthquake. You can find her online at chiarabarzini.com. She's on Twitter. Her handle there is at Chiara Barzini. She's on Facebook. Track her down on Facebook. She's on Instagram, if you would like to peruse her photos on the internet. Chiara Barzini. Things That Happened Before the Earthquake. Thanks to Kill Rockstars, as always, for the music. Be sure to check out killrockstars.com. If you would like to write to me, share your thoughts, let me know what you're feeling. The address is letters@otherppl.com. Go get the Other People app. It's free. Best way to listen. If you would like to support the show, patreon.com/otherpplpod. So here's a concern of mine. Like that I don't contain enough multitudes as a podcaster and as an artist in general, an artistic, creative person. Like, is there have I maxed out? Is there only do I only have 6 things that I talk about? You can reduce me, is what I'm trying to say. You can reduce anybody. I find this as somebody who listens to podcasts. I need to contain multitudes. Got to keep reading, make my world bigger. I think that's why I do these conversations. Try to, widen the scope. Just don't want to bore you. I just want to contain multitudes.